You're listening to Dirty Feet, a podcast from No More Radio.
Vous écoutez le podcast Dirty Feet sur les ondes de No More Radio.
Hosted by,
Animé par
Allison Burns,
JD Papillon,
et Stéphanie Morin-Robert.
Stay tuned.
We're gonna move you.
So for our 53rd episode, we have Anne van den Broek with us today. It's a great pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
She'll be talking about the piece that will be, along with her other works, of course, but a piece that will be presented at UNC the 19th, 20th, and 21st of November. And the piece is called Lette. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Can you maybe talk about what brought you this far with dance? Where did you start? Maybe a little bit about your background, where you studied?
When I was around 11 years old, I started dancing in amateur school, following classes. And quite fast, I took all the disciplines, like African dance, electric boogie, it was called in that time, contemporary, it was one of the few contemporary classes in the amateur schools there. Anyway, a lot, tap dance, classical ballet, everything. And it was quite clear that it was actually the only place I really felt I could express myself with my body and not with words. I learned by now a bit. And then it was actually around my 14, 15, it was clear, okay, I want to follow a professional education. And then I did just one audition to enter in Rotterdamse Dance Academy, it was called. Now it's called Codarts in Rotterdam. I was taken there because of my improvisation and my contemporary. Yeah, and then I did the education, and around 20, 21 years old, I had a job as a dancer with Christina de Châtel. She's a Hungarian woman based in Amsterdam, who, with a lot of minimal dance, really repetitive. And then it just continued on. I was there 6-7 years, and then I went to Charleroi Danse in Charleroi, Belgium, with Frédéric Flamand. It was totally different. And there, the dancers really had to make all the material because he was more a metteur en scène, not a choreographer. And I knew, okay, I want to do that because I want to investigate more my own style, because I knew from the beginning I wanted to make my own choreographies. I just wanted to have the experience as a dancer and as a human being to grow older, and I waited until I was 30 to take the step, to say, okay, now I'm stopping working for other choreographers, I'm gonna do my own creations. So that's when I started, and I started around my 30s with solos first. Mm-hmm. It was for me important to go through the move material myself. It was also very confronting because you cannot step out, so I was going a little bit crazy with that because, if you want to try to find transitions in the piece or things like that, as a dancer it feels different sometimes as what you see from outside. So I was going a little bit schizophrenic, crazy. And then 2 years after, I created a duet with a friend of mine, Belgian, because I'm Belgian, so she was from my city. It was also in my class in Rotterdam, and she came to live in Montreal. And I thought, okay, I would like to create something on another body, also not only mine, but her constitution was totally different. Her physique was totally different. She was very lyrical and linked more legato, and I'm kind of compact and with a lot of accents and very earthy. And with that I challenged myself to also to really put my material on a totally different body, and what was the consequence about that, how is it looking. And from that moment on I decided to make group pieces and to not dance anymore myself, because I really it fascinated me to work with all these different body types, but they really have to learn my way of moving. Mm-hmm. So it was like that, and then all the pieces came.
This latest piece, Lette, you have some brackets in that title there. It's CO, opening bracket, TE, close, LETTE. Yes. Can you explain that? I feel like titles are a window into the work. So what does that mean for you, is that punctuation?
Yeah, it's Cotelet I created in 2007, so it's not my latest piece. But the brackets in it, it's like I'm sure here it's the same. If you have the brackets not, if it's Cotelet, it's a piece of meat. And then the brackets are there. If you take it out, you have Colette, what is a female name, and also the name of the feminist writer of Colette. Yeah, there is always something double in my work and in the titles and in everything actually. So,
is this concept a starting point that you then create with that in mind, or is it something that comes out of the work when you start physically and then the concept?
I call it there's a title, and then I put between brackets working title, but most of the time, 99% it stays the same. And it's already because you have to, of course, also ask for subsidy and make a file and all these things. And it's like 1.5 years up front in Belgium and in Holland that you do that. And it stays quite the same. Also the theme, the working method I'm going to use, more things are really staying the same as when I intentionally wrote it down.
Okay.
Of course, there's an openness because you start creating, you're in the studio, you're with the dancers, and a lot of new things come up. But basically it's all there. So also the title. And for me it was Colette, a woman, and then Cotelet, a piece of meat. But to have the name and the personality of the woman, and at the same time just the body, the piece of meat. And it can be towards society and sexually, but it can also be just the fact of getting older and dying, and you're just a dead body. I mean, there's a lot in it.
And is this approach to the body as matter, as something that you're going to use as a choreographer, much in the same way in visual arts that painters would use paint? Is it something that comes back often, the body as pure matter?
Yes, yeah. I'm gonna skip for now the philosophical part, but if I just look at the working method that I developed autodidactically along the years, I mean, my work, it starts from an emotional intention actually. And you have the basic emotions, the basic emotional states: anger, fear, lust and desire, sorrow, pain, joy. And so it's an emotional thing. I go into the studio with a video camera on my own. I have some improvisational tasks, very limited. I start improvising. But then, after that, I step out and I'm looking at the video together with my dancers as to a human body that has no emotions, while the movement material starts from the emotions. And so it's also very double. So in that part of the process, it's literally, what is she doing? Her finger is going there, her eyes are going there. It's like that. It's really pure looking from the outside then. And then it's sometimes really copying what I'm doing at certain moments, and at the same time it alternates the whole time. At the same time they have to go through this emotional state themselves to get to material. Yeah, it's double the whole time. That's what I mean, everything is double.
And when it comes to your dancers, do you feel that when they reproduce what they see on stage, when they put it inside of their bodies, do they usually find that emotional genesis of the movement just by going through the movement? Do they feel it emerge out of the movement, or do you have to discuss with them the emotional aspects that led to the movement in the first place?
Yeah, before that they look at the video anyway, which is also always, now I'm used to it more, but for me it's a very private thing. That's why I want to do it alone in the studio, like also for Cotelet, if you saw me improvising. Those tapes are sealed and secret. But of course, I had a talk with them about the concept, how I started improvisations, from where it starts. So I give them already the basic information about the emotional intentions. So it's not totally distant that they're looking at it, and that's what I'm saying. It's a double working, getting to one point. So they know in a way, and then it's a very full. I can give a lot of examples, but I mean, the dancers that I work with now, they are really working a long time with me already. So, I mean, they I have to do and they know what I mean. And they found this balance of this emotional state and at the same time executing a rhythmical form with that emotional state. So they are in an emotional state, but then there's so much information coming of counts and rhythm and millimetered spacing and so many details. Now they can really have this everything in at the same time. While before I had to go into the discussion about, but the emotional state, you're faking it. Let's go back to basics. Let's just stand, imagine or autobiographically what you experienced or from an image, because certain people can work more with images for their own fantasy as with their own experience. And then you go back to basics. Okay, lust. Imagine your body is in lust. How is a human body, female body, reacting in lust? And then you still have different females, but in the end we have the basic things where lust is felt. So then I go back to get it simple, because the easiest thing is that they start reproducing an image of, like very theatrical. Oh, this is lust, but I see immediately it's not coming from your core. You're acting the lust. I mean, theatrically acting. So we have a lot of those discussions and talks and research about sometimes one hand that has to move and how is it moving, and and then it goes. It can be hours on one little thing, and other days I'm going so fast with so much information. It's also, again, two paths that I'm switching on.
So Côtelette is actually, as you mentioned, a piece that was created in 2007. Are you still using the same dancers in that work, or have you remounted it? Has it evolved or changed since? And to add to that, I believe it was also a film.
After the film was made. After.
After 2007.
Yes, it was in 2010 or 11, my brain.
And yes, I'm interested on the people who've been involved in that project, and how's that changed going from stage to film and then back to the stage.
The people who are dancing it, it's originally Cecilia Moisio. She's the blonde Finnish dancer, who did Ruiz Onandi, she's Spanish, and Theodosia Stati, she was Greek. The role of Theodosia has been changed now for the third time. The other two are still sick. They're doing this for 6 years. It's like they had 120 shows with it and a lot of rehearsals. They are Côtelette. It's like... but this role, and it's a bit strange also, because I mean, the part that Theodosia was doing, it's a bit an ambiguous part. And I also was looking for a body type, actually more a weaker female body type, not as strong as the others. And it was very typical that it's that role that has to be changed through another person. And then it was Frauke Marian that I still knew as an amateur when she was small, who took the role over, and normally she was also going to be here, but she was in another project at the same time. So now it's Francesca Monti taking over the role, who is in my latest work. Also, voilà. And for the rest, it's all the same. And then going to the movie, it's totally different, because if you do the full-length show live in an audience, the live performance, you have this immediate contact feeling with the public. Of course, when you are performing for a camera, it's totally different. So it was very good that they did so many shows before the camera and Mike Figgis came there, because you have to work in cuts, while it's very important that from the beginning to the end you take every emotion of the different states with you to have a consequence for the next one. And for that also during filming, I said to Mike, we have to do, because it's 3 big parts in Côtelette. For me, you have a kind of intro part where I literally very dry given information about different invisible islands, and every island has another emotional state, and the dancers really walk like a robot to that island, get into the state, go in a little crescendo, and then cut it off and go to the next island. So it's the intro of the whole base of the emotional states. The middle part is the pink part, it's the euphoric part, it's the, losing yourself or wanting to lose yourself part. And then the last part is actually a mix of everything. It's more the desperate part. It's like 3 big parts. And with filming, we did those parts because it was impossible to do it in little cuts, in little parts, because you just see on the body. I mean, sometimes the body is also red, or because of slapping, or from the knees on the floor the whole time. And then if you do it separately, they are looking fresh with no blue knees or no blue. It was for them hard in a way. Of course, we shot it in 5 days, and it's to go again through this emotion and again and again and again. But it was a very important experience for all of us, I think. But I think they were very happy to also be back on stage with it and just go from beginning to end and feel if
that
an audience is with them
the
or
audience.
not. Yeah.
And as a choreographer, was there something about being involved in the filmmaking that you were able to go get details that you feel you can't get on stage?
Yeah, you see much.
And how was that kind of learning process?
Normally, in all my work, how the focus is used, it's choreographed also. It's part of an emotion or what I want to see or what triggers me. But still, you have the front in a live performance. With the film, my figures was going around, so it was 360 degrees. So even although you're aware of how you use your focus from the moment you turn around, you're aware that normally you're projecting something with your back to the audience. But now they were aware of that, and the camera was suddenly there. It's another feeling. So that was something I worked on a bit more with them, but it had to go very fast in between the shooting and for the rest, of course, all these details. And I also had my imagination, like in the last part, the machine rubbing, we call it, that the camera would be from low middle, really, not creative, just low middle, because then the women become big and you see them going up and down all the time with their torso. And Mike followed that, and there were things I was inspired on the moment itself, and I saw also the rushes after every day. And of course, what is typical, all the details of the close-ups. It's some close-ups, it's amazing. So that was for me, and it's also something I want to do more with film. I'm busy with it. In my next project, there's going to be a live camera on stage in the dark with a little lamp.
And that's for a red piece?
No,
the
that's
red piece.
Then the black piece.
Oh, well, I haven't
next year.
even heard of the black piece.
No,
yet.
because it's not existing yet. In real, in my head, yes, but
oh, wonderful. Okay.
That's the red piece. Was the last one, yes.
And it's the one that you're touring with.
Yes.
After Montreal, right?
Yeah.
And maybe can you talk a bit about the red piece? I guess we won't have the pleasure of seeing it yet here in Montreal, but I am really interested in whether the process is something that's carrying on in your work of this overlaying and working with emotions and desires. There's a lot of...
I have to talk then a bit about those last 12 years and the place of lette in it. And like I said, it's autodidactically that I went through things. And along the way, when I was reading more also about Stanislavski method and Grotowski method and things like that, I was like, oh, but I'm doing a bit of this and I'm doing a bit of that. What is this? And every piece actually, like, lette is about lust and desire, but the piece before, it was a group female piece, was about an emotional shock, and physical or emotional, so violence and abuse, or an emotional shock you get, and how you get into a dialogue and escaping from it and confronting with it. That was the first group piece. Then I went to the theme and the emotion research of lust, desire, and the appearance of the female body. Then I went especially to non-comprehensible human behavior together with mental isolation and the pain that a loved person feels when you have no contact with somebody. And it was also about my brother died then. So that piece came in between. I didn't plan it. I just had to do it. That was Isolement, that piece was called. And that was really about the male role was mental isolation and how you get somebody in a physical behavior that you think, what is he doing? You cannot follow. And then the female part was the paying part and also the admiring part and a lot of love, but at the same time pain of losing that person, mentally and then later physically. Then I went to the emotion of the communication, like that you are not able to communicate, even if you can, is your message coming across? And being trapped in a body you hate, and it was also about gender, and that piece was called We Solo Men. It's a group piece with a ceiling full of microphones. And there I, for the first time, also used the live sound, like in the microphones, some microphones, if the dancer said some words, because before that on stage I never worked with text or words. In producing some material, or creating, yes, but then when we went on stage, I took all the words out. So that the mimic of communicating was still there. And We Solo Men was then about that communication and also a bit the image, like you had 6 gorgeous men with 2 women as a man, but very styled in the piece. And then by the end, 2011, I thought, okay, I actually went through all these different emotional states. I've done them. I would like now to take all the climaxes of just the movement material climaxes, the crescendo parts of the crescendo of a certain emotional state, put in a rhythmical form. I want to take them from all the pieces I created and want to make them simpler and put them in slow motion. And that was Q61, a piece, and after that, there was a kind of break for me. I was like, okay, so what now? Plus, along the years, my work got more introvert, like also with speed. I didn't want always that it was like fast and compact. I started working with slow motion, trying to look for something, again, different layers of perception. And I thought, okay, then 2012 was the year I did like 4 or 5 guest choreographies for other companies and dancers. And then I thought, okay, the red piece is going to be like a new start, but I'm not going to throw away everything I found and researched. I'm going to still do the same. It's just I want to use more the elements and put it. Now I'm more busy with how you look at things before also, but I'm putting more combinations together, like more in an absurd way, or that I'm using with what is reality. That you have to find more your own way of looking at things, also as an audience. And that was the red piece, and the base of the red piece was passion. And passion is actually the base of all those emotions. So actually I went deeper than before. Yeah, voila, I don't know what to say more about that.
No, that's great.
Plus also, because I had new dancers, it's also an item. Some of them were new, most of them were new. And because some stopped dancing, some are focusing on their own work. Yeah, some needed a break. And I thought, because I work, very close with them, and I thought, all these new dancers and this piece, and I missed being on stage. And I'm not a dancer anymore, but I'm also on stage in the red piece, but giving actually, like the creator, also with passion, the creator. So I start something, simple things, it's a foot rhythm, and they take it over. Then I walk, and then you see a certain thing. It's also with ropes and Japanese bondage. There's a lot in it. And you just see that I start something in my head and it continues into the dancers, but it also by the end starts leading its own life, because with passion it's, let's say, a very positive thing, because you have an action, you have a drive to do something. But how far do you go in it, and how far is your belief that you're going for your passion, and where does it become extremism or obsession, or the limit is very thin, the line is very thin. So it's about that, and also controlling, because from the moment you are passionate, there is a big control in it. When are you losing the control? Having too much control and losing it, also a lot. And then hate, love, also relationship. And because it's taboo to say you're fighting with somebody and I hate you. And, you know, we always want this beauty, but it's not real. I think life exists out of two sides, and you have to try to find a balance in that. Otherwise, you're faking something. So,
before the interview, you were telling me that when it comes to movement and musicality, you're very rigorous and very precise in what you're making your dancers do. But you're exploring a lot of themes where emotions, well, very powerful emotions, which take over the body and almost leaves it incapable of being rigorous. How is that worked with the dancers, like exploring those emotions which brings them to a state where they are not fully in control, and yet they have to be so precise and rigorous?
It is a bit timed, and it's intuitively I do that. I cannot say a rational thing about that. I feel it. I see, they're going there, but it's not enough. They're not going deep enough. How do I get them there? And then sometimes I throw away the form fast, and I say, just go to a climax. I don't care how. Use the material, use the speed you need, use whatever. If you have to shout, get there. And then a lot of times they get there, but then it becomes overdone. But then they went to that point, and then I can pull them back again into more the clean form. And then to find a balance between this overpowering emotion and the form. It also goes in etaps, and sometimes I go back and then forward, and but it's an intuition what they need at which moment.
This tension between two extremes seems to be very much at the core of what you like to explore.
It's not what I like. It's just I'm like
how
that.
You work.
For me, life is like that also.
Okay.
It's I cannot do anything else. It's as simple as that, yeah.
And for the dancers that you work with, how do they feel about always being pulled like that and always having to embrace two different sides, which for you come natural but might not come natural for them?
Yeah, that's the choice of the dancers. And sometimes I made a wrong decision with choosing a person, but most of the time the people working with me are also in a way functioning like that. So it's fitting how different personalities that they are, or body types, it are also people who have this double, and it cannot be as extreme as me maybe, but or they really want to explore because they feel like with this I can go deep in my life. They don't want just to dance and function, or they have the same issue. So it's the choice of with who you work together. That's why also sometimes in auditions I can see the most great dancers, but from the moment I have the feeling like they're treating it as their good profession, I need to feel the necessity to do that. It's my necessity, and I want to work with people who feel this necessity. And there are different levels. Not everybody has to. So it's first of all that, and then further on, don't forget, it can sound extreme, but don't forget we are in a safe space, normally if we work together. So you feel also things. If I feel, or they also feel it from me, I'm more vulnerable that day, or I'm more... You feel and you work with each other. You know, there is not a law, like, and now I want you to go far, whatever. It's really in a human way, like you grow together. So also for some dancers with certain issues, it took me together with them some years to get to this very sensitive part. It takes years sometimes. That's why most of the time I work with the same people. Otherwise, you cannot get to know somebody and all their deep issues in one production. It's and for them also me and my style. And it's hard because most of the time freelance choreographers and freelance dancers, it's like I call it job hopping. It's nothing for me. And that's also for a moment I feel that I'm like, you're great, but this is not going to work.
There's a clear benefit to working long term, but what about the sustainability of these performances, as you're saying, for Cecilia and Judith, who've been there the entire time, 120 performances 7 years later, how...
And also of the other pieces, there are more pieces.
Right.
And we're touring, a lot of times we are touring different pieces at the same time. So they are jumping from isolament, pain and sorrow into desire, and it's like, but...
Is there another sort of way of taking care of themselves? Like, you know, you eat well, you sleep well to be active, but to be that emotionally sensitive each night on stage. How do they prepare for that? How do you prepare them for that?
By now, I don't prepare them anymore. They do it themselves. They know what they need. They know what kind of concentration they need before a performance. We see if there's a lot of time in between certain performance dates with one peculiar piece. We make sure that we always do a run 2 days before, 1 day before, that they get back into this world. And they're busy with it in their own lives, even if they have to do other things. They're busy with it mentally. What is very important, that is visualizing, and visualizing your body in the piece and visualizing your emotion. It's work that happens at night, in the evening, in the morning, when you go to the toilet. It's different moments. You don't really have to physically rehearse. I really believe in this whole visualization and concentration. But by the time it's the performance, most of the time they're quiet, they're very focused, and it's really building from being blanco, building step by step on in the performance. And like, for example, with Isolament, Cecilia had to start crying, the poem just like that, bam, and doing a kind of washing, but like with distance. So in the whole, with the man and the woman, it's like they are in another time. They don't see each other. And she does the washing of somebody dying, you know, like a person who is... she had to start crying like that. And for that, she herself, I told her, I said, I want you to start crying. And we tried in the beginning with those fake tears and things like that. But she didn't feel comfortable with it, me neither. And I didn't force her into anything. Herself, she said, yeah, I know, I have to really cry, I have to go in myself. So she's 15 minutes before the performance, isolated, going through things, hitting herself, going through her own memories and emotions, and to be able to be in the emotional state, she has to be. But you have to want to do that. There are people who say, oh God, not me. But that's what I mean. Happiness doesn't come in one piece. There is non-happiness to be able to feel happiness. Mm-hmm. And that's important.
Relativity.
So, yeah.
So thank you very much for being with us. And for those who are interested, for Côte de Lette, it's the 19th, 20th, and 21st of November at 8 p.m. at Uzense. And the length of the piece is 60 minutes. This is also a work that won the Swan Award for the Best Production. And yeah, thank you once again. And... have fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you have a piece of music to share with us that we can play to represent the show.
Yes, it's the music of the performance, Côte de Lette, and the composer is Arne van Dongen.
Up next with us, we have Sarah Bild, who is presenting her work as part of the program Traces chorégraphiques with Densité, and it will be presented from November 20th to November 23rd at 8 p.m. at the Théâtre Rouge Conservatoire on Henri Julien. Last time we saw Sarah Bild was at Tangente in collaboration with Susanna Hood. So she's coming to present this time as the choreographer in collaboration with her three dancers, Sarah Henley, Alexandre Parenteau, and Isabelle Poirier. And the piece is called Plus Vrai. So hi Sarah, how are you doing today?
Very well, thanks.
Good. So first of all, for the audience members, our listeners who might not know you, could you tell us a bit about your background, where you studied, what brought you into choreography, just general overview?
I'm a Montreal choreographer. I've been living here for almost 30 years. I trained at l'ADMI when it was still l'ADMI, before it became l'École de Danse Contemporaine. I was in the second year of its training program. So I've known that school a long time. I teach there. It was really the basis of my training as an artist, I would say. They made me an artist. And I continued to create, kind of always independently, hiring dancers as I needed them. I founded a company, Bild in '96 when I went to Romania to work with a company there, and I decided to come back and continue that creation with the Prague trilogy. I've been interested in dance as basically anything that involves the human body on stage. So those boundaries between dance and theater and performance are not that important to me. I think as long as you're using your human body, you're dancing, really. I like the idea of really opening up the concept of dance. More recently, I've been really deepening an improvisational practice, which is called action theater. I met Ruth Zapora, who founded the technique in 2003, and since then I've trained to become a teacher in the technique, and it has really informed my dance process by liberating the voice as vocalization and also as in the use of words. And so that has permeated my work as well and how I direct dancers.
And for this new piece, it's part of Traces chorégraphiques with Densité. How did this come about? Was it a project that they approached you with, or did you contact them saying, I have this new project that I'm interested in presenting?
A bit of each. I think Danielle and I were due to... He had presented me before in 2001, and I had slowed down a bit because I had some children in there since then. But I think he was interested... I had created a trio in 2011 called the Kiefer Trio, and it was based on some research I was doing into my family history, and more particularly my father's history during the Second World War and the Holocaust. And I thought I wanted to push that research with a trio. I mean, it seemed to be the kind of the story of my family with three sisters, and it was really delving almost very literally into that history. And I had just kind of built an initial sketch, what I call the sketch, which was 20 minutes long, of this trio. I danced in it, and I thought I wanted to revisit that material and create a longer full evening work. And a lot of things happened in my personal life. It took me 2 years to get back to this work now. And I realized that I didn't want to look into the past anymore. And I felt that not that I'd kind of conquered that or done it, but I knew it was in me, and I wanted to look more towards the future. And the future of dance for me, I think, is, if not more abstract, it's something about opening myself very much to what presents itself to me rather than going to seek something specific. I'm really in a nouveau questionnement, a bit of a midlife crisis, I guess, but in a really positive way. I'm just very opening to working differently. So I didn't want to come in with a preconception.
And do you feel that your experience with action theater has really brought you to this point of wanting to let things come to you and evolve naturally rather than forcing something?
Absolutely. I think that's the improvisational spirit, is very much, I think we're all as artists seeking truth in some way. And sometimes the truest thing you do is that first thing you do. And it's, and I'm not saying that everything needs to be improvised, because as a choreographer, I adore really designing things and really choosing things and really perfecting things. So there's a lovely balance in that. But I wanted to be able to train my dancers to be in the moment and in the sensation of what we call the moment-to-moment experience, because this is a live art form. And there's something very special about creating live, your present moment with the audience. And that's why we all love hearing live music, for example, more than just a recording. It's a different experience. Those musicians are sharing their present with you. And the same with dance. And I think as I get older, I think I'm much more interested in that.
I would appreciate it if you could expand a bit on action theater and the methodology behind that.
Mm-hmm. I'd be glad to. It was a bit of a head turner, for like a kind of a mind shift for me. It came at just the right time in my life when I was questioning a lot about performance, and it gave me the tools. Well, maybe just start at the beginning. A lot of people think that to practice improvisation seems to be contradictory, but it's not. Improvising, yes, is being open to the moment and being ready to do anything, but we need tools of practice for that. And things like knowing space, knowing composition, making good rhythmical or tempo choices, and content choices, and not repeating yourself, knowing when to pause, things like phrasing. All those things can be practiced. Musicians know this. Improvisational musicians absolutely know that you need a technique to improvise. And dancers do too, and any movers. And so this amazing practice founded by Ruth Zipporah is very rigorous, it's demanding, and it opens up this notion of everything starts with the body and in sensation. And based on that sensation experience or sensory experience, you can come to voice and you can come to words. And what it helped me is become a much more three-dimensional performer. As dancers, I think we are often taught to look good and to create good lines. And yes, we're technical. We're technical experts, but we're not always called upon to be whole beings. I find. I mean, that's my opinion. And I think that to liberate the voice is a really important thing for dancers to do. It's something about claiming themselves as whole beings and whole participants in an artistic process. And I know that action theater has helped me do that, and I hope I've started to teach it. And I am really passionate about bringing this to the dance community because I think it's very, very rich.
As a teacher of action theater, how, you've been in this process for a while now, but you're also seeing new people who are starting to embrace this process. How do you feel it's being received? Do you feel that it's really taking some people out of their comfort zone, or are people just feeling more liberated through it? How do you see it?
It's an interesting question. I think a bit of both. I mean, I think like any technique, it either works for you or it doesn't. But what's wonderful about action theater is you can really work it at the level that you're at. I mean, there's some total non-movers who come to the technique. Poets, writers love it because it engages their imagination. You kind of work it the way you can, but you still try to stay with sensory experience. Yes, there's some people very uncomfortable with voice, and they just can't get it, but they are challenged and they're interested in opening that possibility up. I was just teaching at UQAM last week, and there's some people very honest. Yep, voice is a real handicap for me. It's a real, and but it's like anything, you need to practice it. I mean, I used to complain to my teacher because words used to really stump me. And she said, yeah, okay, you've got the moving thing down. Of course, you got to practice the words. I mean, nothing comes easily, so you got to practice it. And yes, I think it can take you out of your comfort zone. I think I pride myself on trying to teach to people's strengths. And I think that's a really important thing about the process. And like any improv practice, you know what you do well, and sometimes we tend to go into those habits, and then we get tired of them, and we want to learn to do something else. And I think that's what's really great about action theater is it can really open up your range.
Are there guidelines involved on how to access your voice to even begin?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. There's a lot of, it's tapping into the breath, and it's about sometimes matching movement. We talk about sounder mover, so you're your sounder to your own movement. It all can be very abstract, and then it can be very concrete. We work things like isolating speech from gesture, so that you only speak when you don't move. I mean, you can't see it on the radio, but anyway, there's some wonderful exercises. It's all very playful. It's really fun.
For those listening and maybe interested, because I'm definitely interested and it's something I'm starting to work on, is using the voice a lot more. Where can we get this kind of training, and where could we follow one of your classes?
Well, I'm really proud to say I'm going to start a regular class at La Poile in January. I'm going to probably start with a weekend intensive, and then continue within a weekly class.
So we've talked about it as a developmental tool for dancers, but it is also something that you use as part of your choreography.
Mm-hmm.
And as a choreographic tool, how do you approach it differently from when you give classes? How do you use it to make those choices as a choreographer that you're talking about, but while embracing this openness also?
That's interesting. I think one of the key things I use in directing my dancers is I talk about specificity of movement. So something that we do in action theater that is really helpful is to break our habits, justement, is to think about when you're moving in some kind of fluid fashion. It's like, okay, well, what's grabbing my interest here? Oh, my wrists all of a sudden are really interesting to me. And so we go into the wrists and we bring our attention to a specific part of the body rather than always moving in some kind of generalized fashion. And we'll move our attention from different parts of our body to become specific, to make specific choices. And there's something very useful in creating movement that way, but also in directing dancers to be specific. Because dancers get so good, I mean, that's what's so great about dancers, and I respect so much, is we become really perfected in doing things, and then it almost becomes second nature, and we don't think about it. And to put your attention somewhere draws the attention of the audience to that place, and it can make things look really particular and interesting. And the other thing that's really great is for a dancer to stay really fascinated with what they're doing. And sometimes when they become really good, it becomes kind of routine, and they're not that fascinated with it. And I really believe as a performer, if you stay fascinated with what you're doing, the audience will be too. So that's one of the ways in how I direct my dancers. I would say maybe there's a more dramatic element, too, that I've started bringing into my choreographic work, kind of more expressive, expressionistic, and that comes from improvising that way. You know, we allow for shouting, we allow for whispering, we allow for all that kind of nuance.
Are there moments in the performance that's coming up at Théâtre Rouge, Plus Vrai, are there moments that there is space for improvisation? Or, because I know that there's a balance of you really enjoying using improvisation as a tool and also using it as a performance method, but also being very particular in detail and as a choreographer. So where do you find that balance? And
so that, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm actually also doing a solo, and that's a structured improv, very structured improv, but I will be improvising in some of that. But in the trio, I devised a very clear structure, and inside that, I've asked the dancers to do what we call implosion and explosion of the dance phrase. And so at any moment, we always know where they're going to be when, and that's an agreement. But inside that, they can interpret how they might want to stretch the movement or compress it, bring it really far inward, and when do they really want to play with it and expand it. And we use that in how we built the piece as well. So I think they would say, yes, they have quite a bit of room to move.
This sounds so expansive, both your concept and the way that you're working the choreography. How does it stay cohesive, or is it cohesive?
I think that's where the structure pulls it all together. It's so interesting you say that, because during the process, when we were really blowing it wide open, we would do a half an hour of the piece the way it was, and then I would let them do a whole half hour of revisiting the first version, but living it in their own space, in their own field, like, as I say, super imploded, minimalist, or super exploded. And it was amazing what happened. Some of the rencontres were really different, some of the timing was different, but there was a coherence to it. But now, so we have all that baggage and that experience, and now we've brought it into the theater, and I would say it's very set. I don't want to suggest that it's wide open. But I think the dancers, it would be great to ask them, but I think they feel they've got room.
Talking about the dancers, you have some pretty fantastic performers collaborating with you here. You have Sarah Hanley, Alexandre Parenteau, Isabelle Poirier. And one thing that I would use to describe all three performers is that they have a lot of sensitivity when they perform. Is that part of why you went to choose them?
Absolutely. Interestingly, I know them at all three different levels. Isabelle is a kind of contemporary of mine. We went to school almost at the same time. I adore her maturity, and we've worked together before. Sarah Hanley, I know a bit less, but I was her teacher at LADME, and I just adore her presence. She's so engaged on stage. This is a first working relationship with Alex, and I chose him, yes, for his clarity of being and his physical clarity, and he's also just amazing mover and a great problem solver. He's a good partner, he's a good lifter, all those great things. It's been a really wonderful experience to get them to stay in that sensory place and not to go into there, because they're such professionals. They can really turn on the flash if they want to, but I'm not into flash. So it's always about just staying really true, really in the moment. And that's been really great.
One of the things that is interesting about your approach to voice is that whereas we often see it as this almost theatrical tool, your approach to voice is a bit different. It's not so much about reading a text that will create this narrative or that will point to what you're trying to say with the piece, but your approach to voice is a bit different than that. Could you explain to us a bit how you approach the use of voice and of words that might not exactly fit in the more theatrical approaches we see nowadays?
Yeah. Well, again, because I think I'm using voice as a physical action, it's about how it comes and informs your physical presence. And so, for example, there are some tableaus where two dancers are just whispering to each other. And it's just a lovely accompaniment in a way. What it does is it creates this intimacy in them and an intimacy between them. The audience doesn't necessarily need to know what they're whispering about, but there's something about the listening and the sound and how it supports them and how they play off each other rhythmically that creates a whole world. And it's very it's tender, and it allows us to kind of read what we want onto it rather than actually need to understand the meaning of anything. And then quite in contrast, there's a scene where all three dancers are moving and working their way up to full-on rants. And again, those rants, I've left them wide open. Some of them are more comfortable with that than others, but wide open. I don't care what you rant about, it's just got to become a rant. And again, doesn't matter what the content is, but we feel the surge of anger we can all identify. And again, it doesn't matter about meaning. You know, this is what I find is interesting, is I think kind of like, you know, you get a lot from watching maybe a film without subtitles. If you don't understand the language, you can pick up a lot from voice, and it's a universal, how human beings use their voices. And so I use it almost more musically in some ways.
So then how does the voice of your performers interact with your composer's work?
That's really interesting. We worked very hand in hand, and Martin created these kind of, it's Martin Tétrault who did the original composition. He created what we call these, kind of soundscapes that sometimes come in and really fill the space and then can recede, almost like a hum, something that kind of holds the space. But the dancers' voices modulate inside that. It's a very close relationship between the music and the voices.
Is it set, the music, or does he interact with them?
No, it's set.
Okay.
Yeah, it's already made.
Looking at the postcard here, there's a very strong visual and also the teaser for the piece as well. You're working with a scenographe, and maybe the visual, is this a part of what we're kind of going into? Very earthy, and I think there are themes here that are kind of reflecting of this just being human, right?
Absolutely.
And very earthy. So maybe talk about that. How present is the work of Lars in all of this?
He's created quite a wonderful lamp-type sculpture. It came from my initial idea that I had. It was about this proximity to the dancers and a kind of an intimacy. And I wanted to create these kind of salons. And so I wanted to bring a wall closer to the audience so the dancers wouldn't be so far. So we created a wall at about 20 feet from the audience, and then the rest of the stage goes right back 40 feet. And in front of this wall, in order to kind of create this hearth-like setting, but again, it's quite imaginary, Lars created this amazing lamp made of found objects and rusted metal. And the lamp represents home in a weird way, a hearth, kind of. And yes, there is a dead plant, and there's also a live plant, and whatever symbolic that brings in. But there's something always for me about what human nature is and the nature of being human. And interestingly, Lars, who lives up at Mont-Tremblant and works in the forest, and he sees the piece very much as about a pull between the urban and nature, and how we live as kind of sophisticated or somehow culturalized humans. So I think all those things run through the piece, without necessarily being about that. Mm-hmm. It's just present. And this is an image that really happened by chance in one of the improvised sections, where one of the dancers put the pot on top of Alex's feet, and it just struck me. And when you don't know what an image means, but it has strength? Yeah, I quite love it.
And so we've been talking about the performance of your dancers, but you also mentioned that you'll be doing a solo.
Yes.
Is the solo part of Plus Vrai, or is it something that is complementary to the piece?
I think it's quite complementary. It's not part of it, but because I work very intuitively, and my new solo Diptyque is very much in the same world that it's been created within the same 6 months. My being is still involved in Plus Vrai. And yes, I think there's my approach to space and time that's involved. Danielle from Densité, Danielle Soulière, suggests that there's something about me presenting myself as the creator first, and then then the trio is presented, that I'm almost giving, am I giving some cues or tips as to how to read my work? I'm not sure. But there's very much, there's something about the lonely artist or the lonely composer in his garret about my solo. And I think there is. I hope it'll help to maybe understand what's coming.
Was this solo created before, after?
After.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you have in mind all of the themes that you explored for Plus Vrai? Or was it something that you had something new in mind and it evolved and it just ended up being placed?
Yes.
With that, okay.
But I think, as I say, because Plus Vrai is in my bones right now,
Mm-hmm.
it's in the solo as well.
And it's the first time that you're doing a solo since... it's the first time you're doing a solo then
in a
for
long
a while.
Time. Yeah.
How are you approaching that? How does it feel to go back on stage by yourself, present something of yours, but dancing in it?
It's really interesting. It feels, I've always said this, but I feel it more than ever, that I think being choreographer, dancer for solo is almost like a whole other art form. It's so different than being choreographer outside your work. And as I say, it's that designer in me that is the choreographer, where I really get to choose and perfect, that you don't get to do from the inside as a dancer performer. And there's much more left to chance. There's much more left to instinct. It feels more raw, like I'm really just sharing my kind of state of mind and my present moment with the audience. So in some ways it feels less refined, but maybe, I hope, closer to truth in some way. I think it's a gift I'm giving myself. It's a sense of permission that I'm going to dance this solo. Yeah, I don't know. I'm very excited about it.
We've been talking with Sarah Bild, who is presenting Plus Vrai, part of Trace Choreographe, between the 20th and 23rd of November at 8 o'clock. And the theater is Théâtre Rouge du Conservatoire on Henri Julien. So thank you so much about talking about your work.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
And you're going to let us listen to a little piece of this track from your show. Can you introduce us to what we're going to be listening to?
Yes, it's a part that we called Hésitation, and it's created by Martin Tétrault. Beautiful collaboration that I've experienced with him. He's working from his own sounds, as well as a kind of a deconstructed piece of Beethoven's, a string quintet. So there's some elements from that are entwined in his own work.
Dirty Feet is recorded every week at the Montreal Improv Theatre. Check them out at montrealimprov.com.
Dirty Feet est produit et animé par
Produced and hosted by Allison Burns,
JD Papillon,
et Stéphanie Morin-Robert.
You can find out more about our show at nomoreradio.com, follow us on Twitter at Dirty Feet, and find us on Facebook at Dirty Feet Podcast.
Vous pouvez écouter tous nos épisodes sur notre site web ou vous pouvez vous abonner également sur iTunes à notre podcast.
Listen to past episodes on website or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes.
While you're there, be sure to give us a rating and or leave a comment to help us spread the word.
Tune in next week for a whole new show.